All right. Good evening, everyone. Today is Wednesday, September 18th, 2024. My name is Jen R. I am a recovered Al-Anon, and I will be leading this meeting. We want to welcome everyone to our Al-Anon Big Book Recovery meeting. This is a step speaker meeting that meets every Wednesday night at 5:30 p.m. Pacific, which is 8:30 p.m. Eastern. We will study the 12 steps by using the precise instructions out of our Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous as they relate to us as Al-Anons. Let's get our meeting started. This is the original AA preamble written by the AA Grapevine describing the fellowship in 1940. We've studied the preamble with an open mind and open heart to consider how it applies to Al-Anon. This helps us to stay focused on the message of recovery the pioneers intended while observing the traditions in action. Through the actions taken based on the instructions of the basic text, we comprehend what the pioneers meant when they described the membership of AA, which is that they worked a program of recovery and they no longer drank. In our case, we no longer obsessed over the alcoholic. Through continuous action and study of these principles, the understanding of the value of the original preamble reveals itself. We ask for your humble consideration of our sincere admiration of the pioneers of Alcoholics Anonymous. The simple hope is that we of Al-Anon will grow into the same clarity and unity that birthed the original 12-step fellowship, because without them, after all, none of us would be here. Right, so here is the original AA preamble. We are gathered here because we are faced with the fact that we are hopeless over alcohol and unable to do anything about it without the help of a power greater than ourselves. We feel that each person's religious views, if any, are his own affair. The simple purpose of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is to show what may be done to enlist the aid of a power greater than ourselves, regardless of what our individual conception of that power may be. In order to form a habit of depending upon and referring all we do to that power, we must at first apply ourselves with some diligence. By often repeating these acts, they become habitual, and the help rendered becomes natural to us. We have come to know that as alcoholics, we suffer from a serious disease for which medicine has no cure. Our condition may be the result of an allergy which makes us different from other people. It has never been permanently cured by any treatment which we are familiar. The only relief we have to offer is absolute abstinence, the second meaning of AA. There are no dues or fees. The only requirement for membership is the desire to stop drinking. Each member squares his debt by helping others to recover. An Alcoholics Anonymous member is an alcoholic who, through the application of and adherence to the AA program, has forsworn the use of any and all alcoholic beverages in any form. The moment he takes so much as a drop of beer, wine, spirits, or any other liquid containing alcohol, he automatically loses all status as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. AA is not interested in sobering up drunks who are not sincere in their desire to stay sober for all time. Not being reformers, we offer our experience only to those who want it. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree and, on which we can join in harmonious action. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our program. Those who do not recover are people who will not or simply cannot give themselves to the simple program. Now, you may like our program or you may not, but the simple fact remains that it works and, we believe, is our only chance to recover. There is a vast amount of fun included in the AA fellowship. Some people may be shocked at our seeming worldliness and levity, but just underneath there lies a deadly earnestness and a full realization that we must put first things first, and with each of us, the first thing is the solution to our alcoholic problem. To drink is to die. Faith must work 24 hours a day in and through us, or we perish. In order to set the tone for this meeting, I ask that we bow our heads in a few moments of silent prayer and meditation, followed by the Serenity Prayer. Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thy will, not mine, be done. I wish to remind you that whatever is said at this meeting expresses our own individual opinion as of today and as of up to this moment. We do not speak for AA as a whole, and you are free to agree or disagree as you see fit. In fact, it is suggested that you pay no attention to anything which might not be reconciled with what is in the AA Big Book. If you don't have the big book, it is time you bought one. Read it, study it, live with it. Follow the directions in it and learn what it means to be an AA. End of preamble. A sponsor is anyone who's had a psychic change as a result of working the steps and has a willingness to work with others. For those looking for a sponsor to guide them through the steps, please stay tuned and have your pens ready to record phone numbers immediately after the meeting. Each Al-Anon group ought to be a spiritual entity having but one primary purpose, that of carrying the message to the Al-Anon who still suffers. This is our primary spiritual aim. Our job as a group is to provide people with a place to learn about and work the steps. It has been our experience that working the steps consistently provides us with a better, saner life. We consider all else to be an outside issue. This includes personal problems. The proper venue for sharing such problems is with the sponsor. This is, after all, where real recovery takes place and working the steps with the sponsor. We are just so glad we are all here, and we are all here because we are not all there. There will be a period of fellowship after the meeting. If you have questions, if you need a sponsor, if you need to check in or get current, or if you want to discuss other literature, please stick around for the fellowship. That would be a better time for these subjects. All right. So that only took 6 minutes, all that reading. Thanks for listening in. We are now going to get into our step study. And so, like I mentioned, this meeting happens every Wednesday throughout the month. So the past 2 Wednesdays, the first Wednesday of the month, I went over steps 1 through 3. And so I'm just going to quickly do like a little review of what we sort of learned up to this point. So in step 1 is that powerlessness over alcohol. And we share that same step with the alcoholic in Al-Anon. So I'm also powerless over alcohol because the alcoholic's powerless over what the alcohol, right, over the alcohol, taking it in, what it does to them. And we learned about the body component in the doctor's opinion, which really talks about this allergy that the alcoholic has. And as a non-alcoholic, it helps me to better understand why, an alcoholic might tell me, okay, you know what, I'm only going to have 2, or, I'll just have 1 tonight, or, I'll watch what I drink, or whatever it is. And it seems like once they start taking that first drink, whatever it is, whether it be beer or wine or liquor or whatever, they seem to want more, that second drink than the first, and the third drink more than the second. And then, they really seem to lose control, right? What was supposed to be 2 drinks is all of a sudden 8 or 9. They're all of a sudden, at the bar now, and, they're missing, right? They're missing in action. Okay. I'm just going to take a sip of water here in a little bit. And so anyway, we see that the body is different because when I take a drink or 2, I start losing control, right? I don't feel in control anymore, and I want to stop that feeling, right? It's uncomfortable for me. The alcoholic, on the other hand, starts feeling more and more in control. Their problems fall from them, and everything that was bothering them and all the stuff that they're trying to figure out, suddenly they have a solution, right? And it's the alcohol. And then once they start drinking, right, they've totally lost control over the amount they take. And so I don't have that physical allergy because I'm not also an alcoholic, like the alcoholic has, but I do have, the mental obsession around alcohol. And so for an alcoholic, a mental obsession is really, them having every good reason in the world, right? A job interview the next day, some big promotion, maybe wife's having a baby, kids graduating, it's someone's birthday, whatever the big event is, right? Whatever the big reason, maybe their spouse said they're leaving them for good and all if they take another drink. So they can have all the good reasons in the world for not taking another drink, right? That first drink, yet stone cold sober, their mind tells them it is a good idea to do so, and here's why, right? Or they don't even think that much about it at all. They just take that first drink. And I share that same problem with the alcoholic as an Al-Anon. My mind tells me, even though countless experiences have shown me, right, starting to meddle, intervene, chasing around, waiting up all night, right, not very good things for me, right, stuff is not happening when I'm acting like this. People aren't really liking me anymore. I'm telling people what to do. My relationship is very strained with the alcoholic, if there's much of one anymore at all. So I'm doing all this kind of crazy stuff. And so I know, right, when I'm not in it, I should not do that, right? So I'll make a resolution. Hey, I'm never going to do this thing again. I'm going to block them. I'm just going to stop for good and all. I'm going to call my BFF, girlfriend, instead of calling that person. And, my mind tells me it's a good idea to do it, whatever the silly reason might be, right? Maybe it sounds like a good reason. Maybe, it's just a small little time. It's a reason, any reason, right? And so my mind takes me back to that first, thought of what can I do to try to fix and control the alcoholic, and their alcohol in my life, right? So I'm powerless over this thing too. Okay. In steps 2 and 3, it's really, believing that a power can restore me. And step 3 is making a decision for that power to start working in my life and giving over my will and my actions, right, my thinking and my actions over to God. Last week we talked about steps 4, 5, and 6. So step 4 was made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And what we learned is that it's a fact-finding, fact-facing process. Where was I at fault when I'm taking this inventory? You read how Bill did his, right, and his resentments at Mr. Brown and, all the things that Mr. Brown was doing. But we also read that selfishness and self-centeredness are the root of our troubles. And a lot of times they're driven, right, by fear, delusion, self-pity, self-seeking. And we learned that we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Okay, whether we realize that or not. Okay, and so we're going to make a list. So we talked about this last week, right? A list of our resentments, our fears, and our sex conduct. Okay. Step 5 is when we give that away to our sponsor, to another human being, right? We're admitting it to ourselves, to God, and to another human being, which is typically our sponsor, the exact natures of our wrongs, the exact nature of my wrongs. Okay, so I don't get to really talk about, well, darn it, he or she did all this stuff, they did all this. No longer get to do that, right? I'm looking at my wrongs. Where was I wrong? Okay, there's no program to change everybody else. We would have long ago signed up for that, right? This is a program that's working on trusting and relying on a power that's not me, to solve all this stuff that I've been trying to control that I cannot control, okay? And then step 6, we learned that we do that. Typically, we do that during our 1 hour after our 5th step with our sponsor. We take 1 hour and we pray and we meditate and we reflect and we spend some time with God. We spend time with our inventory. We look at it. We were ready to look at it from an entirely different angle. And then we ask God, right, or we get ready rather, we get ready for God to remove these defects. In step 7, which is what we're going to look at tonight, okay, so I'm going to turn back to page 59 in the book. These is where the steps are. I have the 4th edition. So I think it'd be helpful just to even read this. It's on the top of 59, it says, half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took, which was suggested as a program of recovery. So really these steps, okay? Step 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. So after I've just done, right, my 1 through 3, I've written my inventories, I've, discussed this with my sponsor, and then I, got ready in step 6 to ask God to remove them. And then now I'm going to actually ask God to remove these shortcomings, okay? And how do I know what my shortcomings are? That's the whole purpose of step 5, right? And having our sponsor be there and go over, hey, you know what? This was your fear. This was your selfishness. This was pity, right? This is your resentment, right? All those things that I have, my jealousy, my envy, all that stuff, right? and I asked God to remove it. And my sponsor told me to ask God to remove my fairy tale princess life. She said that to me. And I think, I share that because I think a lot of us have this idea that our lives should be, right, a certain way, right? I did all the things that I thought I was supposed to do, and now, right, everyone in my life should be responding the way that I think they should be responding, right? I thought when I came into the program, I should already be married. I should have had my kids by now. I should have, had the job that I wanted and live in the house that I wanted and, all this kind of stuff. I thought, I was like owed something, right, for all the wonderful, helpfulness I was giving to the alcoholic, right, just as a joke, because I really wasn't being all that helpful, right? And so anyway, I have to ask God to remove all that stuff, right? So was my fairy tale princess life. It was not real, right? What's real? And what was real was, right, I had a lot of anger, had a lot of resentment toward my family, my friends, my exes, okay? I had so much fear that, things wouldn't go the way that I thought they would go, fear that the alcoholic wouldn't sober up, right? Because, of course, they need to sober up. Otherwise, I thought my life would just be, totally better, right? It would be the way that I think that it should be. And, I was lying and cheating and manipulating. And so I had to ask God, right, to remove those things from me. So on page 76, so it comes immediately after step 6, okay? So I always tell the people when I'm, after we do our 5th step together, the people that I'm sponsoring, go ahead and, when you're ready, you're going to say that 7-step prayer. That's at the, second paragraph of page 76 after step 6. And, you can say it 100 times. You can say it in your own way. But ultimately you're asking God, take away this stuff from me. Okay. That's not serving me. And we're also going to ask God to take the good stuff. And the reason is God's in control of all of it, right? Excuse me. I'm just extra tired today. Kind of a long day. So when ready, we say something like this: my Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. Okay. So, a really simple prayer, and I say this prayer many times throughout the week. Sometimes I say it a couple times a day, depending on where I'm at, right? But ultimately, take all this stuff from me. Why? Because it's standing in my way of being useful. Because when I'm stuck in self, I'm thinking about me, myself, and I, and all my problems, and gosh, how am I going to figure this out? How is this going to work out? And how am I going to get this? And how am I going to avoid this? And what's going on with my kid? And right, all this stuff, and I'm stuck in it, and I'm not useful. So I'm asking God, if it's like this this deal. I wrote this in my big book, okay? And I read it every day. And my grand sponsor said this many years ago. She said, if God solves all my problems, I'll do whatever you want, God. If I fail on my end, God's going to take away this exchange. So if God solves all my problems, I'm going to do what God wants me to do. But if I fail on my end, right, so I'm not doing what God would have me do, God's going to take away this exchange, right? It's not going to work like this anymore, okay? So if I want this stuff gone, I'm going to have to do what God wants me to do. And here it's saying, take away all this stuff which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and to my fellows. I've got to be useful. I was not very useful in my Al-Anonism, okay, in my illness. So let's move on to step 8, okay, because we're getting into amends now. And amends is something that's really, really powerful. And I want to make sure that we, adequately cover it. So let me turn to actually I don't need to do that. Let me just look here. So it says step 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. So step 8 is really just about making a list, okay, and becoming willing. Okay, 2 parts. Okay, so I'm not actually going out and making any amends yet. Okay, but I need to become willing to make them once I list them on paper. Right, we'll list them out on pen and paper. Now, certainly I can just write them out, as like a laundry list, and I've done that before with my amends. It was literally just like a really long list. I had a sponsor one time tell me, do a now, maybe, later, never. So like the ones you can do in the first, next 3 months, the ones you can do within 6 months, later, maybe, now, later, maybe, never. So later, within the 6 months or whatever, maybe I want to make those ones, maybe not, maybe I won't be able to for some reason. And then never would really be like, maybe they passed away, or maybe I'm just like not willing to, I don't want to make that amends, right? For whatever reason, maybe that person really harmed me and I don't ever want to see their face again, right? And maybe it was an ex. For me, it was one of my exes. And I make that list, and then I'm going to go over each one, and I'm going to ask God to help me be willing to make that amends. Now, I might not be willing to make an amends that's on that never list, in the next week or two after I've, worked through the steps with my sponsor. That might take me a while, but I'm going to start praying. And some of the ways that I can get there, and it, tells us some stuff in our book here, but some of the ways that I can get ready to make those amends. I'm going to look at, let's see here, 60, okay, 67. I don't know why I was so confused. I'm thinking 63. So at the bottom of page 66 and the top of 67, it's going to tell us that some of the people on our grudge list, right, our resentment list, are sick people. So let me back up just for a second. When I'm making this amends list, I am literally taking all of my people from my 4th step inventory and placing it on there. And the book tells us that we do that. So it says, now we need more action, without which we find that faith without works is dead. Let's look at steps 8 and 9. We have a list of all persons we have harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends. We made it when we took inventory. So that was our 4th step list, right? We subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal. That's like our step 5, okay? Now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. That's step 9. We attempt to sweep away the debris which has accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. If we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. Remember, it was agreed at the beginning we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. So a lot of times in the beginning, right, our sponsor might tell us or ask us, right, are you willing to go to any lengths to recover? Okay? And the answer needs to be yes. And if the answer is no, right, then we're not ready to go through these steps. So in order to go through the steps, right, the answer needs to be yes, right, a very strong yes. I'm willing to do whatever. If my sponsor told me I could, how to stand on my head for 3 hours every morning when I woke up and the obsession would be gone around the alcoholic, oh my gosh, I would have done it in a heartbeat, because that obsessive feeling is literally like, and if you got it, I'm sorry, because how, right, it gets you. It's like this spinny hamster on a wheel that just can't stop thinking about it and fixing it. And it's, and it's mixed in there with love and lust and hate and, all kinds of stuff, right? And so how do I get, going back to what I was talking about, how do I get to a place where I am willing to make amends to someone that maybe I don't want to make amends to, okay? We say the sick man's prayer. The book tells us, right, page 67. We ask until the willingness comes, right? That's another prayer we can say. When a person offended, we say to ourselves, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God, save me from being angry. Thy will be done. We call that our 4th step prayer, resentment prayer, sick man's prayer, whatever we call that prayer, right? Top of 67. That's the prayer I'm going to say about those people each and every day. And I continue to say that prayer as I'm living in the last 3 steps every day, anytime someone offends me. Because certainly people do stuff that I don't like, okay? And I get offended, right? Like anybody else. But I can't sit in that stuff, right? I need to be okay. Otherwise, right, what happens? And I'm going to go back into spinning and trying to fix and trying to retaliate and trying to control and, all this stuff. So that's me making my list, okay? And I can do it that way that I said about the now, later, or, I can just make a long old list, okay? Step 9, make direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So there's really, the book is pretty clear on how we make amends. And, I know that there's some lingo and stuff where people talk about, I'm just going to make a living amends, or I'm just going to, kind of like wrap them up in a cotton sheet and give them the cotton blanket. Sheet doesn't sound so nice. Cotton blanket. I'm going to give them over to God, and I'm just going to try better next time, right? I'm just going to smile and let it roll off my shoulders. And I don't really need to make amends to my boss, because that's my boss. Like you don't really make amends to them, and we have a lot of that, right, as Al-Anons. And I remember when we got to this step with my sponsor, and we got here quickly. I would say probably within the first 2 weeks of me meeting my sponsor, we got here, okay, right, where I was, going to start making some amends. Now, I remember telling my sponsor, and don't say this, don't tell your sponsor this if you can avoid it, but I told her I don't apologize to people. And I meant that. And I didn't even see how funny or ironic or anything that comment was. I was like, no, I just don't apologize. I just say, oh yeah, okay, yeah, let's do it like that next time. I literally just could not say I'm sorry. Right? And an amends is so much more than an I'm sorry. But I was telling my sponsor, I don't even say I'm sorry. Right? So how on earth was I going to make an amends? Okay. And so that's where prayer comes in. That's where trust and reliance on God comes in. That's where our sponsors come in. They're going to help us. They're going to, are going to help us script this thing, right? We're going to follow what the book says and how to do it. And really, an amends is a way in which I am trying to admit that I was wrong, admit what those defects were, okay, regret what I did, and I'm going to ask, how can I remedy this situation, right? What sort of restitution needs to happen in order to square away whatever this wrong was that I did, or these wrongs that I've done. So, it could be as simple as, what, I owe money to you. I owe you $100, or I was using your Netflix account for, 5 years. I owe you some money, right? And I probably owe Netflix an amends too at that. And so, okay, so I'm going to apologize. And how do I rectify this thing? I'm going to ask them. But certainly if it's something like I stole from you or I owe you something, I need to repay that. That part's not even in question, right? So if I owe you, some money, I got to repay that. And maybe I don't have the money right away. And maybe I, am embarrassed about it or something. And this is why I haven't said anything. Well, guess what? I can give you $5 each paycheck, or, whatever it might be. Okay. Whatever it is that I can do while still supporting my family, right? While still making ends meet. For the people that I need to support, okay? It says need direct amends. So indirect, right? So what if I don't know what direct means? So indirect. What's indirect? Okay, I'm going to, indirectly, do something, right? So that's kind of like a roundabout way where I'm not really facing you or my problem. I'm kind of hiding. Maybe I just, try to be nicer or something, right? Or just avoid you or just smile. No, it says direct. So this means I need to face you, right? The person that I had harmed, you being the person I owe an amends to. I need to face this person and make an amends to them, okay? Whenever possible. So the really cool thing about amends that I found in working this program is God really makes it possible to make amends to people that I never thought I would even see again, okay? I would just, what if I run into this person, right? I have an amends ready to go, right? People that just kind of fell off, I don't know, but God's made a lot of these things possible. Right. So, it's easy for us to say, oh, you know what? I'm not really mean to anyone. No, that's why we do a fifth step, because we got to get honest. Okay, hold on a second. So we definitely owe an amends. Okay, let me read some stuff out of the book so that we can see how we're doing this thing. Okay. On page 76 and 78 through 78, there's a lot going on here. It says, probably there are still some misgivings. As we look over the list of business acquaintances and friends we have hurt, we may feel diffident about going to some of them on a spiritual basis. Okay. Let us be reassured. To some people, we need not and probably should not emphasize the spiritual feature on our first approach. We might prejudice them. At the moment, we are trying to put our lives in order. But this is not an end itself. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. It is seldom wise to approach an individual who still smarts from our injustice to him and announce that we have gone religious. In the prize ring, this would be called leading with the chick. Why lay ourselves open to being branded fanatics or religious bores? We may kill a future opportunity to carry a beneficial message, but our man is sure to be impressed with a sincere desire to set right the wrong. He is going to be more interested in a demonstration of goodwill than in our talk of spiritual discoveries. Okay. There are still some misgivings, right? That means we might not quite be ready, okay? And also, the people that we're going to make amends to, exploring us, could still feel hurt by what we've done to them, okay? So it's saying that it's probably not the best idea to go to them and say something like, hey, I got religion. Hey, I found God, and I want to tell you how awful I was to you, right? Or say, hey, you know what, I'm in the 12-step program and I need to do my step 9. There are some people that we might be able to approach in this way, but for the most part, it's not going to be very meaningful to someone as we approach them like that. Okay, so I'll give an example of, so my very first amends that I ever did, and I chose someone who I felt like I could, meet with them right away. And so I wasn't going to see, this is a former roommate of mine, and I wasn't going to see him, just in my regular passing in the next week or so. So I asked, hey, let's meet up on a weekend or whatever for lunch. And we met up for lunch, and, I was tasked now with something more difficult than I had done in the past, which was I needed to listen to this person. Okay. I had an amends to make, but also this show is not about me. Okay. Even though, right, I knew I had requested this lunch because I wanted to, meet up and make an amends. But, I also needed to know, hey, what was going on in your life, right, to my former roommate. And so we met up and we talked, and it was a casual conversation. And I was listening, right, trying to actively listen, and that's something that I learned how to do in program. It wasn't just about when am I going to get my turn and when am I going to get to say what I want to say next. And, it is still something that I struggle with. I really want to share, right? Oh, I have a story just like yours, right? That's my selfishness, right? Wanting to kind of, even if my motive is good, right, and I want to connect with you, it's still selfish, right? And it's sort of taking away from someone else's story and experience, okay? So I'm listening and all that, and then I go and I make my amends, and I made my amends for I used to go into his room and clean. So when I was vacuuming, I would, I always kind of just treated him like a little brother. That's really how I saw him, even though that's not who he was. And I don't even think a little brother would appreciate me doing that. But I always thought, oh, I'm such a nice roommate. I'm going through the room and I'm vacuuming the room and moving stuff around and, opening closed doors and, yeah. Whatever. And so I'm not, obviously this is not something that people enjoy. And, I think I'm actually kind of telling the story a little bit wrong, but it doesn't really matter. Ultimately, I have to say my amends and ask what I can do to make this thing right. And then I have to shut up, right? I have to zip my lips and I have to listen again. Okay. And he started to tell me, hey, he said something like, oh, I'm really proud of you for, kind of admitting this, right? And then he started telling me about all the other things that I was doing. The food that I would steal and the encroaching on personal space and touching things and moving things around and all the stuff that I did that I really didn't even realize, or remember, right? And I had to listen, and it was hard, because it was stuff that I had done wrong, right? And so, I said, I apologize for that too, right? And what can I do? And, of course for him, it was, we're friends, and, I was like, hey, we're not going to do that again, and just, keep getting help and keep getting better, or whatever it is that you're doing, right? I don't even think I said anything about being in program at that point. So, that's one that, and the book does tell us 9 times out of 10, right, these things are going to go pretty well. But the reason I mention this is, we need to go at it from an angle of being useful and helpful, being honest, and not just something that, hey, I need to check this off my list. Okay. And so, there have been times where, I had a bit, one time I had a big financial amends to make. I wasn't paying for something like I should have been. And, it was actually quite difficult to even find, someone who I needed to tell this to. I was at the city and I was calling, and then I, showed up in person, and then it was this big thing. And, I eventually made my amends, and I had quite a big payment to pay, and I paid that off. And, it was a good deal on my end. Okay. They, worked out a good deal. And, from that, I was really free from that amends. And that's sort of what happens when we make these amends. We start to get freer and freer, okay? Because no longer am I feeling like, when I'm doing something else that you're doing, or, man, I was kind of crappy to that person. It's just gone. So if I run into that person or I think about that situation, it's not there anymore, right? It's gone. Like I've made that situation as right as I could. Now, it doesn't matter if the other person throws me out the door, right? I've done my part, right? I've tried to do everything I can do. I can't do better than that, right? I just want to make sure no one's trying to, okay. All right. So let's move on to see what else the book says about this. So the book says a lot about amends, okay? There's a lot to hear. It says, we go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit, confessing our former ill feeling and expressing our regret. So again, we're going with this helpful spirit. Under no condition do we criticize such a person or argue. Yeah, it's no longer about, hey, but you know what, I did this because you did that, right? Something we might do in the past, right? Simply we tell him that we will never get over drinking until we have done our utmost to straighten out the past. Okay, so here it's telling us a situation where we might want to say this. We are there to sweep away our side of the street, realizing that nothing worthwhile can be accomplished until we do so, never trying to tell him what to do. His faults are not discussed. We stick to our own. If our manner is calm, frank, and open, we'll be gratified with the results. Now, being gratified with the results, just a heads up, might not mean that the person forgives us and that all is well and now we're BFFs. Gratified with the result means that, you know what, God, I know in my hearts of hearts that I did the best amends that I could have done, right? I did my very best to make this thing right. I've paid my payment. I've said what I, needed to say. I've apologized for what I've done. I demonstrated my regret, right? All of this stuff. It also says not to argue, not to criticize, and not to tell them what to do. So we're not talking about the wrongs that they did. So, sometimes we like to look at our resentments and be like, wow, you know what, like they caused like 90% of the problems, right? And I only caused 10% of the problems. Okay. Or my part and their part. Well, what about their part? And they need to apologize for their part. Well, really, right? They don't. Unless they're, they're an Al-Anon or an alcoholic and they're not going to get over their drinking or their Al-Anonism unless, right? They really don't need to, okay? But I need to, right? So if I go to them and start criticizing them, arguing with them, nothing good's going to come out of this, and I'm no longer there with a helpful and forgiving spirit, okay? The other thing is, before I even go and make this amends, I need to make sure that I'm coming from a place of being helpful and having a forgiving spirit. If I'm going to them like, you know what, beep, 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 this, beep, 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 right, and this person just can and suck it and right, probably not ready to make that amends, okay? I really need God to help me see where I was wrong, okay, in order to make that amends. So I will give you another example, okay, of an amends that I made where it was a little bit difficult for me to approach this person, and it was difficult to see that I was wrong in doing what I did. So this was a person, a former coworker, and basically I'd asked them to do something. My classroom was moved. I asked them to do something, and they didn't do it. And I asked again, they didn't do it, and so I reported them to my boss. And of course, my boss was like, "What? They need to do this," and then made him do it. But in doing so, I really kind of jumped the gun and wasn't considering, right, how, maybe throwing this person on the bus and talking about how they're not doing their job when they're really overworked and they really just didn't have time yet to help me with this thing. So I really didn't approach that. I really needed to talk to him about it, right, prior to, reporting him to my boss. And, really stuff like that is I really need to try as an adult to work out problems rather than kind of like I used to do when I was a child and go and run to mommy and complain. That's what my kids do, right? They run to me and complain rather than trying to work out their problem. And so I really didn't try to work out my problem. I just complained, okay? Thought that was the easier path for me. Didn't have to confront. And so I owed this person an amends, but I was still pretty, this person wasn't looking at me, was giving me, dirty looks if they did see me. Was on purpose walking away from me when so I knew that I had offended this person and that I owed an amends, okay? And I talked about it with my sponsor, and I went and I made this amends. And, when I asked if there was anything I could do to make this right, he said it was really crappy that you, kind of sold me out to our boss, right? And I really just felt really angry about that you did that. And I'm still hurt, right? And so I had to listen to that, right? Because that was his time to share, right? And that's what he needed, right, to get out. That was his sort of piece, right, that he needed to tell me. And so I listened, and of course I made amends for that. And, anything else I could do, right? It was really like, okay, let's just talk next time rather than kind of throwing people under the bus that I was doing. And so, I had to pray a lot. And I had to pray the sick man's prayer because this person wasn't, the easiest person to get along with. And there's all this, other stuff I could talk about. But ultimately I had to keep doing that until I was ready at a point where I could say, okay, you know what, I'm ready to make this amends. I'm ready to approach this person. Gratified. Yes, I was gratified with the result. Was it perfect? Did it feel comfortable and, friendly afterwards? Not so much. But I was gratified that I did the next right thing. Okay. So in 9 cases out of 10, the unexpected happened. Okay. So really the unexpected is that most people are totally, willing to understand that we're making this amends, right? Willing to accept our amend. Most alcoholics owe money. We do not dodge our creditors. Telling them what we're trying to do, we make no bones about our drinking. They usually know it anyway, whether we think so or not. Okay? So I did mention, right, this money thing, we've got to pay it back. Okay. And, even if people don't know that we're an Al-Anon, they do know something's going on with us, right? They see how stressed out we look. They see all the, the kind of weird movements that I do and the picking at my nails and all the anxiety kind of induced things and, really spinning in my head about, what the alcoholic's doing or not doing. And they know that something's going on. Page 79 tells us, although these reparations take innumerable forms, there are some general principles which we find guiding. Reminding ourselves that we have decided to go to any lengths to find a spiritual experience, we ask that we be given strength and direction to do the right thing, no matter what the personal consequences may be. We may lose our position or reputation or face jail time, but we are willing. We have to be. We must not shrink at anything. So this sounds, it might sound scary or, far-fetched or something like that as an Al-Anon jail time. Like what? But there's certainly, we might lose our position, our reputation, right? That sounds a little familiar, right? As an Al-Anon, we might lose our reputation. But there's certainly things that we've done, and if we're honest, there's things that, maybe I've done that I just never got caught for, right? Whereas the other person did, right? Stealing, right? I've stolen in the past and, maybe running red lights or, speeding or whatever it might be, right? Lying on applications or whatever I've done, right? Or whatever we might have done. It says that we must do the right thing no matter what the personal consequences. So even if I think that, my boss might fire me, because I've done something wrong, even if I think that, they're going to report me or, file some charges against me, or get a ticket or whatever for something I've done, I have to be willing to make this amends. It's not about, I can't do that because I'm afraid of what might happen. So we're not in charge anymore. I'm not in charge of what the consequences are. Okay. This is something that I've done in the past that I need to make right. Okay. If I want to be free. Okay. If I want to stay in my selfishness and self-centeredness and I want to stay stuck and stay in hamster wheel thinking and not be free and not be connected to God, then sure. I can keep hiding and keep lying and keep stealing and keep manipulating and keep doing all that stuff. But I have to be willing, right, to do this if I want to be free. Okay? No matter what the personal consequences. We must not shrink. Okay, shrink is like shrivel, go, worry too much. And no, God's going to handle this. And what I found, and I've made some pretty big amends and I don't know, and, we don't need to compare mine to anybody else's, but I feel like I've made some pretty good, pretty big ones that had some, could have had potentially some really bad consequences for myself. And I found that in doing that, again, 9 times out of 10, it turned out okay. Not only that, but I don't have to worry about that stuff anymore, right? I'm free from that stuff. Page 80 and 81 says, before taking drastic action, we might, which might implicate other people, we secure their consent. If we obtained permission, have consulted with others, asked God for help, and the drastic step is indicated, we must not shrink. Okay. So here it is. So in my personal situation, right now, perhaps, or just, it doesn't really matter about my own self, but let's say that we are the, the main source of income for the family, right? And, ending up in jail, right, might not be the best thing because I'm supporting, children and a spouse and all that, right? And so, I'm going to talk to them first. Another situation would be where maybe, I stole something with another person, right? She and I did it together or whatever it might have been. I'm not going to, implicate that other person right? Just so that I can be free, and, I need to gain consent first on that stuff if someone else is included, okay? The chances are that we have domestic troubles. Perhaps we are mixed up with women in a fashion we wouldn't care to have advertised. Okay, they're talking about cheating, infidelity, okay? We doubt if, in this respect, alcoholics are fundamentally much worse than other people. Okay, this is a common thing, okay? Perhaps we've sought out attention, flirting, whatever it might be, because our, alcoholic spouse at home or whatever it might be was not paying much attention to us, right? We can be mixed up, right, with women, with men, in a fashion that we don't want advertised, okay? But, right, we're going to have to make this right, okay? It says the alcoholic is like a tornado, roaring his way through the lives of others. Hearts are broken. Sweet relationships are dead. Affections have been uprooted. Selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. We feel a man is unthinking when he says that sobriety is enough. He is like the farmer who came up out of his cyclone cellar to find his home ruined. To his wife he remarked, "Don't see anything the matter here, Ma. Ain't it grand? The wind stopped blowing." So it's not enough to just be like, okay, I've stopped trying to control you. I've stopped, being, the obsession around the alcoholic, right? It's removed or whatever. I'm not, engaging in those behaviors anymore. That's not enough. I've got to make it right for all that other stuff that I've done, okay, throughout the years. So the spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. Unless one's family expresses a desire to live upon spiritual principles, we think we ought not urge them. Yeah, guess what? I don't get to tell my family that they need to pray and meditate with me every day. Or that they need to, attend this service or do this, or they need to be honest in this way, or, say sorry in this, right? I don't get to do that. We should not talk incessantly to them about spiritual matters. They will change in time. Our behavior will convince them more than our words. We must remember that 10 or 20 years of drunkenness would make a skeptic out of anyone, okay? 10 or 20 years of my Al-Anon stuff will make a skeptic out of anyone, right? If I try to tell you, my goodness, I've tried to tell my mom how to run her life, my brother how to run his life. I just thought I was better than, just knew it all. It says there may be some wrongs we can never fully right. We don't worry about them if we can honestly say to ourselves that we would right them if we could. Some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter. And there may be a valid reason for postponement in some cases, but we do not delay if it can be avoided. We should be sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble, without being servile or scraping. As God's people, we stand on our feet. We do not crawl before anyone. So, a couple things here. One is we have to accept sometimes that there might be some wrongs that we're not going to be able to make right. Okay? And if we can, God's going to show us that. We might have to send a letter to someone. This is not my out for sending like an email or a text to someone because I don't want to have to like meet up with them because they live kind of far away and blah, blah, blah. Right? No. Okay? This is like, maybe they're in another country, they live across the country, I'm never going to see them again. We're going to talk about this with our sponsor, okay? And we're going to not delay if it can be avoided, okay? But it does tell us that we're going to stand on our feet and we're not going to crawl. So it's not this, I'm so sorry, I can't believe I was just such a, what, and, please, I'm so sorry. We're not crawling. We're not trying to get them to, give us some type of, forgiveness for it, right? This is not, the outcome again, that's in God's hands, not mine. So we're not crawling, we're not, begging, pleading. I'm saying what I did was wrong, right? I'm admitting my faults. I am talking about my character defects, right? I'm admitting those things. I am showing regret, and I am asking what I can do to make this thing right. I am not, overly, trying to, again, I would just be manipulating them, okay? And that's not what I'm doing. Page 84 gives us some 9-step promises, and I'll end with this evening. It says, if we are painstaking about this phase of our development, We will be amazed before we are halfway through. So before I'm halfway through with my amends. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity and will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we'll see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic security will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. These promises are absolutely incredible. They happen pretty quickly when we start going through our amends. So if you're new, if you're listening to this and thinking, oh, I can never do that, I am telling you, I was one of the people that thought I could never ever do this, and I have, and I sleep very, very well every single night because I am not up worrying about this stuff or anybody else. Okay. Okay, so let me get into my, thank you for listening to me. Appreciate everyone. Okay, in closing, the seventh tradition. Every group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. This group does not have a payment structure in place and currently requires no overhead expenses. If you'd like to fulfill Tradition 7, please direct contributions directly to the Al-Anon World Service Office by visiting al-anon.org. For questions about this meeting, or if you are looking for a sponsor, please send emails to Al-Anon Big Book Recovery. Again, Al-Anon Big Book Recovery at gmail.com. Recordings can be accessed on YouTube by searching the symbol, Al-Anon Step Speaker in the YouTube search box. If you're interested in other Al-Anon meetings that follow the Big Book, please visit www.alanonthigbooksolutiongroup.org. This comes from our Big Book, page 164. Our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. The answers will come if your own house is in order, but you obviously cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and for countless others. This is a great fact for us. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to him and your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as we trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. Now let's have a moment of silence for the Al-Anon who still suffers, followed by the Lord's Prayer or a prayer of your own choosing said in silence. Who loves us and keeps us sane. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Okay, I think I turn off the recording.